far back in time, before the written word shaped itself into books and chronicles. The Slavic world was born in the quiet embrace of rivers, forests, and endless skies. Imagine a land where the horizon seemed eternal, where meadows stretched like waves of green, and where dense oak and birch forests whispered secrets to the wind. It was in this landscape, soft yet powerful, that the first whispers of Perun's name would take root. Though his form was not yet fully known, not yet carved in wood or sung in hymns, the people who lived there were deeply connected to the rhythm of the earth. Their lives followed the steady flow of rivers and the turning of the seasons. Spring meant rebirth, with flowers breaking through the soil, while summer carried warmth and abundance. Autumn brought golden harvests, and winter blanketed the world in stillness and silence. To them, nature was not something separate, but rather a living, breathing being that held them close, like a mother holding her children. When thunder rolled across the skies, the villagers would lift their heads. Some felt awe, some felt fear, and some felt both. For in those rolling echoes of thunder, they heard something greater than themselves, a force that seemed alive, commanding, watchful. Though they did not yet know him by name, this was the first stirring of Perun in their collective heart. Life in these early times was simple, yet not without hardship. The people built their homes from timber, gathered food from the land, and fished in winding rivers. They learned to watch the skis as carefully as they watched the soil, for the skis brought both blessings and dangers. A sudden storm could ruin crops, but rain could also save them. Slowly, they began to sense that behind the clouds, behind the sun and the storms, there was a will, a spirit, something divine. Perun was not yet the mighty god of thunder we know from later stories. At this stage, he was more like a presence, a guardian unseen, but felt. The crack of lightning against a distant hill might remind them of a giant striking his weapon. The deep rumble of thunder might feel like a voice calling out across valleys. Over generations, these impressions settled, growing roots in the imagination of the Slavic people. They began to weave stories. Around firelit gatherings, elders would tell the young that when the sky roared, it was a great being riding across the heavens. His steps shook the clouds, his breath stirred the wind. They spoke of him with reverence and caution, for no one wanted to offend a power so vast. And yet, in these stories, there was also comfort. If such a mighty spirit existed, then surely he watched over them. The awakening of the Slavic world was not only about the birth of myths, but also about a way of living close to the natural order. The forest was more than wood. It was a sacred place. The river was not only water, it was life itself. Each element was respected, and within each element, people felt the shadow of the divine. They believed the oak tree, with its tall, sturdy trunk and its crown stretching into the heavens, was especially sacred. And though Perun's connection to the oak would only later be fully shaped, even then, the people felt a special power in its presence. Imagine a village nestled by the edge of a forest, where smoke rose gently from wooden houses. In the evenings, the people gathered by the fire. They roasted grains, they shared milk and honey, and they told stories. The children would lie close to their mothers, listening with wide eyes, while the old men spoke in low voices about spirits that lived beyond the horizon. Their words were slow, deliberate, like the flowing of a river. These stories were not written down, but they flowed from mouth to ear, from one generation to the next, carried like seeds on the wind. As the centuries passed, the stories grew more vivid. The great being of the skis was no longer only a whisper in thunder. He gained shape. Some imagined him with a beard as bright as lightning, his eyes flashing like fire in the clouds. Others thought of him as a warrior, wielding a mighty weapon, protecting the people from forces that dwelled in shadows. And though every village had its own version, the essence was the same. Perun was awakening in their minds, becoming clearer, stronger, closer. The Slavic world was awakening too. Tribes spread across vast lands, from the rivers of the east to the forests of the west. They carried with them not only tools and skills, but also their stories, their beliefs, their songs. Wherever they went, they looked at the sky and felt the same stirring in their hearts. Wherever thunder rolled, they heard the voice of the same spirit. And slowly, across countless miles and generations, Perun became more than a local guardian. He became a shared god, a thread connecting scattered tribes into one great tapestry of belief. It is important to remember that this awakening was gentle, unhurried. There was no single moment when the people declared, "Here is Perun, god of thunder." Instead, it was like the slow brightening of dawn. At first, only a faint glow touched the horizon. Then, gradually, the light spread, coloring the sky, until at last the sun itself rose, brilliant and undeniable. In the same way, Perun rose in the hearts of the Slavs, first a whisper, then a story, then a god. The people honored him not through grand temples of stone, but through their closeness to nature. A clearing in the forest, where sunlight streamed through the branches, could be a sacred place. A hilltop where the wind blew strongest could be a site of prayer. A mighty oak could serve as his altar, its roots in the earth, its crown in the heavens. They needed no walls or roofs to find him. He was already in the sky, in the rain, in the strength of the trees. Even in times of struggle, this closeness brought them peace. When winter storms howled, the people reminded one another that Perun's power was not cruelty, but strength, strength that protected them from the darker forces hidden in the world. When lightning struck, it was a reminder of his presence, a sign that he was watching, awake and alert. And so, in this early chapter of his story, Perun was not yet the warrior locked in eternal battle with Veals, not yet the thunderer with weapons flashing. He was still awakening, just as the Slavic world itself was awakening. Both people and God were finding their voice together, slowly, gently, like a river finding its path to the sea. As night fell over the villages, and stars pierced the velvet sky, the people would rest knowing that above them, in the silence between the stars and the whisper of the trees, Perun was present. Not fully revealed, not yet called by name in every place, but there watching, waiting, like the first light of dawn. And thus ends the first step in our journey, the awakening of the Slavic world, and with it, the first breath of Perun's presence. As the centuries rolled on, and the voices of the people grew louder with stories and songs, the figure who once lived only in whispers became clearer, stronger, and more defined. What had once been the uncertain presence behind thunder and rain now stepped fully into the imagination of the Slavic world. He was no longer only a distant force. They now spoke of him as a being, a protector, a lord. And the name that began to spread on the wind from one village to another was Perun. Perun was no longer only the nameless guardian of the storm. He was the storm itself, and yet more than that. When thunder echoed across the valleys, it was no longer just sound. It was his voice, commanding and powerful, calling out over forests and rivers. When lightning split the skies, it was no longer only light. It was his weapon striking, sharp and radiant, a sign of his might. The people no longer asked whether such a being existed. They knew, and they gave him form. In the villages, storytellers began to describe him in vivid colors. Some said he rode across the heavens in a chariot, wheels blazing with fire, pulled by wild horses with manes of flame. Others believed he stood upon the highest clouds, holding a great axe or hammer that shone like silver, striking it down upon the earth to keep order in the world. His beard was said to be golden, his eyes bright like burning embers, and his strength beyond measure. But even in their awe, they felt a closeness to him. Perun was mighty, yes, but he was not distant like the unreachable stars. He was near. He was in the storm that watered their crops. He was in the lightning that split old, withered trees, clearing space for new growth. He was in the roar of the heavens that reminded them of courage and order. Perun was not only a destroyer, he was also a giver, a protector who stood watch over his people. It is said that when warriors swore oaths, they swore them in Perun's name. To break such an oath was not simply to fail men, it was to betray the Thunderer himself. His voice in the storm was a reminder of the weight of promises, the seriousness of honor. When tribes gathered to discuss peace or prepare for war, they often called upon Perun, lifting their weapons to the sky, asking him to strike down liars and to protect the truthful. Children grew up with these stories, listening by the fire as their elders spoke of Perun's strength. They learned to see the storm not only as a thing to fear, but also as a sign of life, of renewal, of justice. The storm was fierce, but it passed, and afterward the air was fresh, the fields nourished. So, too, was Perun fierce yet fair. He struck with force, but always with reason. The people came to understand the storm as a cycle, and within that cycle, they saw the reflection of their own lives. Anger, like thunder, could rise suddenly, but it would pass. Struggles, like storms, would eventually give way to calm skies. Perun's storms became a lesson. Strength was not cruelty, but the power to protect and to renew. The oak tree, tall and sturdy, became especially linked with him during this time. Its branches reached to the heavens, as if in constant prayer. When lightning struck an oak, the people believed it was Perun himself touching the tree, leaving his mark. They would gather around such oaks with reverence, feeling that the god's presence had been carved into the wood. Some carried pieces of struck oak as charms, believing they held the power of the thunderer within them. Rituals began to grow around him. In open clearings, on hilltops, or beside mighty oaks, people offered prayers and sacrifices to honor Perun. These offerings were simple but heartfelt: bread from their harvests, milk from their animals, sometimes even the first fruits of the season. On rare occasions, warriors might lay down weapons as gifts, asking Perun for strength and protection. When storms swept across the sky, entire villages might stand together, lifting their arms toward the thunder. They would call his name not with fear, but with trust, believing that his watchful eyes were on them. Some believed that every flash of lightning was Perun striking at the forces of chaos, driving them back to keep the world safe. In this way, the people did not feel helpless in the face of the storm. They felt guarded, part of something greater. The songs grew, too. Gentle, rhythmic chants were sung during rituals, the voices of many rising together like the rolling of thunder itself. These songs spoke of Perun's strength, his justice, his courage. They carried not only awe, but also peace, for to sing of him was to feel his presence close, to know that even in the darkest storm, there was a guiding hand above. Over time, his image solidified. He became the ruler of the sky, the guardian of order, the warrior who fought against all that sought to bring chaos into the world. But he was not feared as an enemy. He was loved as a protector. For the Slavic people, Perun was not a distant god on a high throne, indifferent to their struggles. He was the storm that watered their fields, the lightning that kept the dark forces at bay, the voice that reminded them of truth and courage. The transition from the nameless spirit of the skis to the Lord of Thunder was gentle, but unmistakable. The people no longer wondered if thunder carried meaning. They knew it did, because they heard Perun in it. They no longer saw lightning as a chance occurrence. They saw it as his weapon, flashing with purpose. Every storm was not simply weather, it was a sign of his presence, his vigilance, his power. And so the Slavic world changed. In every clap of thunder, they felt reassurance. In every storm, they felt protection. The Lord of Thunder had taken his place among them, not only in their stories, but in their daily lives, their rituals, their very breath. Night after night, as the firelight flickered in wooden homes, parents whispered to their children of Perun, the mighty guardian in the sky. They spoke softly, so the children would not fear the roar of storms, but instead hear them as a lullaby of strength. The children closed their eyes and dreamed not of shadows and monsters, but of a great protector riding across the heavens, keeping watch. And just as dawn slowly follows the dark of night, Perun's image grew brighter in the hearts of his people. The awakening that began as a whisper had become a voice that thundered yet comforted, a voice that would guide them for generations to come. The voice of thunder had become familiar, and Perun's presence was no longer only felt in the storms above, but also in the quiet strength of the land below. As the Slavic people deepened their bond with him, they began to notice that his spirit seemed to dwell in certain places more strongly than others. Among all the symbols that echoed his power, one rose higher than the rest: the oak tree. The oak stood tall and unyielding, its branches stretching toward the sky as if in eternal prayer, its roots gripping the earth with unshakable resolve. The people saw in this tree the very essence of Perun: strength, endurance, and a connection between heaven and earth. Just as the oak reached upward toward the clouds, so too did Perun's power connect the people to the skies. Just as its roots delved deep into the earth, so too did Perun anchor the world in order and balance. Whenever lightning struck an oak, the people felt that Perun himself had chosen that tree, marking it as sacred. They would gather around such places with reverence, whispering prayers, leaving offerings at the base of the scorched trunk. A piece of wood from a struck oak might be kept as a charm, believed to hold a fragment of Perun's fire within it. Mothers might tie such wood above a cradle to keep children safe from harm. Warriors might carry it into battle, trusting in Perun's protection. In villages across the Slavic lands, oaks became living altars. Unlike temples of stone or shrines carved by human hands, these altars grew from the earth itself, older than memory, strong enough to withstand centuries of storms. When people gathered beneath their wide crowns, they felt as though they were standing beneath Perun's own roof, sheltered by his power. Ceremonies were often held in sacred groves of oak trees. The air there was different still, heavy with meaning. The sunlight filtering through the leaves seemed to shimmer with divine presence. Villagers would bring bread, honey, and mead, laying them at the roots of the trees. Songs were sung, drums were beaten in slow rhythms, echoing the sound of thunder in the distance. And always, the people lifted their eyes to the great branches above, feeling as though they reached the very gates of the heavens. Children learned from an early age to treat the oak with respect. They were told not to break its branches carelessly, not to carve their names into its bark, for the oak was more than wood. It was a dwelling place of the Thunderer himself. To harm it without cause was to risk his displeasure. Instead, they were taught to sit beneath it in silence, to listen to the wind rustling through its leaves, as though hearing Perun's voice speaking softly to those who would listen. The oak also became a symbol of justice. Just as its trunk stood upright and unwavering, so too was Perun believed to uphold truth and fairness. Disputes in some villages were settled beneath the branches of an oak, where both parties swore honesty in Perun's name. To lie beneath the oak was to invite his lightning, and so even the most stubborn of men spoke with caution, knowing the god's eyes were upon them. At night, when the moonlight fell gently through the branches, the people would tell stories of how Perun himself once rested among the oaks. Some said he carved his first weapon from their wood. Others believed the crack of thunder was born from the clash of his axe against their trunks. Whatever the tale, the message was always the same. The oak and Perun were bound together, inseparable, reflections of one another. This bond gave the people comfort. For even when storms raged and thunder roared, they could walk into the forest, find the oak, and feel steadiness beneath its canopy. The storms might frighten, but the oak reminded them of endurance, of rooted strength. Just as the tree endured countless winters and countless winds, so too could they endure life's hardships. In time, songs dedicated to Perun often included praise of the oak. Verses spoke of its strength, of its crown reaching high, of its roots grasping deep, and always of Perun's fire flashing through its branches. When the voices of many rose in song beneath an oak grove, it was as if the earth itself joined in chorus, the leaves trembling in rhythm, the ground echoing with the beat of drums. Travelers who passed from one land to another often carried stories of sacred oaks. They told of groves where no one dared to cut wood, where silence hung heavy as if the trees themselves listened. They spoke of lightning-scarred trunks that glowed faintly even at night, believed to be filled with Perun's spirit. These tales spread, weaving the people together with shared reverence, even across distances. The oak's image also began to appear in carvings and symbols. Warriors etched its leaves onto their shields. Families carved its shape into household charms, and in some places, wooden idols of Perun were carved to stand near oaks, as though God and tree watched side by side. Wherever the oak appeared, it carried with it the quiet strength of Perun's presence. And so, Perun was not only Lord of Thunder, not only the voice in the storm, but also guardian of the sacred oak. Through the tree, his power became rooted in the earth, not just in the heavens. He was both above and below, both the flash of lightning and the slow, steady growth of wood. He was movement and stillness, storm and strength. For the people, this dual presence brought balance. When storms frightened them, they remembered the oak's calm strength. When stillness made them uneasy, they remembered the thunderer's mighty roar. Together, storm and tree became symbols of a world held in harmony, watched over by Perun. As time passed and generations came and went, the bond between Perun and the oak deepened. Sacred groves continued to stand, untouched and revered. Even when the world changed, even when new ideas and new beliefs came, the oak remained a silent guardian, carrying the memory of the thunder god in its branches. And so, under the canopy of leaves, the people found peace. As the wind moved gently through the branches, they heard not only the whisper of the forest, but also the calm assurance of Perun's watchful gaze. They could rest, knowing that the same God who thundered across the heavens also stood rooted with them upon the earth. Steadfast as the oak, Slavic people lived close to the land, in harmony with rivers, forests, and the great oak groves where Perun's spirit was felt. Yet life was never without its trials. Seasons brought both plenty and hunger, Storms brought both blessing and danger, and beyond the borders of every village lay other tribes, other people, sometimes friends, sometimes rivals. In these uncertain times, when the air grew tense and hearts grew heavy, the people turned their eyes once more to the skies and called upon Perun. For Perun was not only the guardian of storms and oaks, he was also the protector of warriors, the keeper of courage, the witness of every oath and every battle. His thunder was the voice of strength, his lightning the flash of justice. In moments of conflict, when warriors gathered with spears and shields, they lifted their weapons to the sky, asking the thunderer to guide their hands and to guard their honor. The bond between Perun and the warriors was deep. To fight was not only to protect land or family, it was to uphold truth and order in the world. And so, before battle, leaders would stand beneath sacred oaks, their voices steady as they swore oaths in Perun's name. They promised loyalty to their brothers, courage in the face of fear, and honesty in all words spoken. To break such an oath was not merely shameful, it was to call down Perun's wrath. Imagine the scene, the dawn before a battle, mist rising from the earth like a pale veil. Warriors gather in silence, their faces lit by the first light of day. The elder lifts his hand toward the heavens, and the people join in prayer. Their voices are quiet, but firm, asking Perun to stand with them, to shield them from treachery, to strike down those who would betray truth. In the distance, thunder may rumble faintly, as though the god himself listens, answering not with words, but with presence. When storms broke out during battle, it was seen as Perun's hand upon the field. Lightning splitting the sky was his weapon flashing, a sign that he watched closely. If the storm favored one side, it was said that Perun had judged the cause as just. And when victory was won, warriors offered thanks at his altars, laying down weapons or pouring mead upon the earth as a sign of gratitude. But Perun's role was not only in the clash of arms. He was also the guardian of peace after war. When tribes came together to end conflict, they swore peace under his gaze. To make peace falsely, to speak empty words of friendship while plotting betrayal, was to risk the strike of his lightning. His justice was not blind. It was sharp, clear, unyielding. Stories tell of how Perun's thunder was heard even in the silence after battle. The people believed it was his way of reminding them that strength should never become cruelty, that courage should never become arrogance. He was a warrior, but not one of endless destruction. His storms cleared the air. His strength restored balance. In the same way, battles were meant not to bring endless strife, but to protect the fragile harmony of life. Children learned of this balance from the tales told by their elders. They heard how Perun stood against liars and oathbreakers, how he struck down those who sowed chaos. But they also heard how he guarded the weak, how he gave courage to those who fought with honesty. These stories were not told with shouts of glory, but with calm voices by the fireside, reminding the young that true strength lies not in anger, but in honor. The oak once more played its part in these moments. Beneath its branches, warriors gathered both before and after battle. The upright trunk, steady and true, became a symbol of how they themselves should stand, unbending, firm, and faithful. Offerings were left at its roots, prayers spoken beneath its shade. And always the people felt Perun near, his gaze upon them, his strength flowing through their arms. In this way, Perun was more than a god of storms. He was the very witness of their lives. He saw their joys, their fears, their struggles, and their triumphs. He was with the farmer sowing seeds, with the mother rocking her child, and with the warrior standing firm in battle. To call on him was to know that one was never alone, even in the face of danger. And though battles brought loss, though storms of steel and fire sometimes took fathers, sons, and brothers, the people found comfort in knowing that Perun himself had seen their courage. They believed that those who fell honorably beneath his gaze were carried not into darkness, but into light, where the Thunderer's presence welcomed them like a father welcoming his children home. So Perun became the witness of wars, not to glorify violence, but to ensure that truth was upheld, that honor remained unbroken, that balance was restored even after the storm of battle. Just as thunder rolled to cleanse the air, so too did his justice roll across the world, reminding all who heard it that strength is sacred when guided by fairness. And when the battles ended, and peace once more settled upon the villages, the people would gather beneath the oaks and give thanks. They would sing songs of Perun, their voices rising gently into the sky, not in cries of triumph, but in gratitude, in reverence, in hope. The storm had passed, the land was safe, and the people rested, knowing that the Lord of Thunder still watched from above. The story of Perun, the Thunderer, would never be complete without the tale of his great rival, the one who rose from the shadows below, Veels. If Perun was the brilliance of the storm, Veels was the depth of the earth. If Perun was order, Veels was the shifting chaos of all that hid beneath. Together, they formed a duality, two sides of one eternal struggle, not of simple hatred, but of balance, light and dark, sky and soil, thunder and silence. The people knew both names, and though they prayed to Perun for strength and protection, they also acknowledged the power of Veels. For he was not only the god of the underworld, but also of cattle, wealth, and hidden wisdom. His domain was not the open sky, but the damp earth, the dark forests, the rivers that twisted unseen beneath the ground. If Perun's weapon was lightning, sharp and swift, Veels's weapon was cunning, slow and sly as the serpent that wound its way through roots and shadows. Legends told of their endless conflict. Veels, it was said, would climb from the underworld in the form of a serpent or dragon, slithering up the trunk of the world tree, seeking to steal what belonged to the heavens. Sometimes he stole Perun's cattle, sometimes the treasures of the sky, sometimes even souls meant for the realm above. His thefts were not only of things, but of order itself. His very nature was to unsettle, to test, to challenge. And always, when Veels rose, Perun would answer. Thunder rolled as the god of the sky mounted his chariot, lightning flashing from his hand. Across the heavens, the storm broke loose as he chased Veals, striking with bolt after bolt, driving him back. The people, hearing the storm rage overhead, knew that it was no ordinary weather. It was the eternal battle unfolding once again. Sometimes, Veals escaped for a time, hiding deep in rivers or burrowing into the earth. The rain that fell during storms was said to be his blood or his tears, shed as Perun's strikes found their mark. But always, inevitably, Perun prevailed, hurling his enemy back down into the underworld. The clash did not end forever, but the balance was restored, the world made safe again, until the next time. To the people, this myth was more than a story of gods. It was a reflection of life itself. For life was always a struggle between light and dark, order and chaos, growth and decay. Just as the fields needed rain, but also sun, just as the rivers could both nourish and flood, so too did the world need both Perun and Veals. Their battle was not the destruction of one by the other, but the eternal dance that kept creation in motion. Still, it was to Perun that the people turned for protection. In every storm, they saw him standing guard, driving back the serpent. In every thunderclap, they heard his victory cry. And when lightning struck the earth, they believed it was Perun's weapon-piercing Veals as he tried once more to climb upward. Each strike was both a warning and a reassurance. Chaos would always try to rise, but order would always answer. The rivalry between Perun and Veals also gave shape to rituals and customs. When cattle grew sick or went missing, people believed Veals had taken them. To protect their herds, they prayed to Perun, asking him to watch over the animals and to strike down the thief. When storms came, families placed offerings on their doorsteps, hopping to appease both gods to honor Perun's strength, but also to keep Veals from mischief. Sacred groves, storytellers spoke of how Veals envied the brightness of the heavens, how he longed to overturn the order of the world. But Perun, ever watchful, never allowed him to succeed. His lightning bolts were like arrows of justice, keeping the serpent in his place. The children listened wide-eyed, imagining the mighty thunderer racing across the sky, his fiery horses carrying him after the shadowy dragon. And when the sky flashed at night, they whispered to one another, "Perun has struck him again." This myth gave courage to the people. For just as Perun never ceased to fight, so too must they endure their own struggles. When hardship came, whether hunger, illness, or loss, they remembered that even the god of thunder faced an enemy that rose again and again. Yet he never faltered, never turned away, but always rose to meet the challenge. His persistence became their model. Strength was not the absence of difficulty, but the will to face it again and again. At the same time, the presence of Veals reminded them of humility. No matter how strong Perun was, the serpent always returned. No matter how orderly life seemed, chaos always lurked beneath. This was not cause for despair, but for acceptance. Life was never perfect, never free of challenge. To live was to walk between storm and shadow, trusting in Perun, but remembering Veals. Some stories told of their battles in vivid detail. They spoke of the world tree, whose roots reached the underworld and whose branches touched the sky. Veels climbed its trunk, wrapping himself around it, shaking its branches, while Perun stood at the crown, hurling lightning downward. Each bolt split the sky, echoing across valleys and rivers. The battle shook the world, yet also kept it alive, for without their struggle, there would be no rain, no growth, no renewal. Other tales softened the conflict, saying that Perun and Veels were not enemies in hatred, but partners in balance. Perun ruled the bright sky, Veels ruled the deep earth. One gave strength, the other gave fertility. Together, their dance of conflict and reconciliation ensured that life continued. For after every storm came rain, and after rain, the fields grew green. Even in their rivalry, creation was nourished. The people wove these ideas into their daily lives. Farmers prayed to Perun for clear skies during harvest, but also to Veels for fertile soil. Fishermen asked Perun for calm waters, but Veels for the bounty of the rivers. In every act, they saw the two forces intertwined, one above, one below, forever shaping the rhythm of existence. And so, the eternal struggle between Perun and Veels was not a tale of despair, but one of hope. It reminded the people that though chaos always returned, order always stood ready to meet it. Though storms raged, they always passed. Though shadows crept upward, light always descended to drive them back. The balance endured, and with it, life endured. When the thunder rolled and the rain fell, villagers sat quietly in their homes, listening. They heard more than sound. They heard the clash of gods, the eternal battle unfolding. And when the storm cleared, leaving the earth refreshed, they smiled, knowing Perun had once again prevailed. At night, beneath the stars, elders whispered these tales to the young. Their voices were low, steady, soothing, painting the eternal chase of thunderer and serpent across the heavens. The children drifted to sleep, imagining the bright bolts of lightning chasing the shadowy coils of the dragon, never ending, always returning. And in their dreams, they felt safe, for they knew Perun never rested, never ceased to guard the world. Thus, the myth of Perun and Veels lived not only in stories, but in every storm, every harvest, every heartbeat of the Slavic world. It was the rhythm of existence itself, conflict and renewal, challenge and triumph, chaos and order. And through it all, the people found peace, for they knew that even as the serpent rose again and again, the thunderer would always rise to meet him. And so the world endured, balanced between the roar of thunder and the whisper of the earth, between Perun and Veels, two forces forever in struggle, forever in harmony, forever shaping the destiny of all who lived beneath the sky. In the quiet after storms, when the rolling thunder faded and the sky cleared into a soft gray, the people often lifted their eyes upward and whispered simple words of thanks, for they believed that every clap of thunder had been Perun's hand striking, every flash of lightning his guiding weapon. And when the storm had passed, it meant he had prevailed once again, chasing the serpent Veels back into the shadows below. Gratitude naturally followed, flowing from their lips like the murmur of a stream. Prayer for the Slavic people was not only a ritual performed at sacred groves or before carved idols, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. It lived in the quiet utterances of mothers as they laid their children to sleep, in the chants of farmers as they sowed seeds, in the songs of shepherds guiding their herds beneath open skies. Each word carried the belief that Perun's presence was never far away, that the god of thunder and sky listened, even in silence. The prayers were not always grand or formal. Many were simple invocations, almost like breaths. Perun, guard us. Perun, send the rain. Perun, strike the serpent. These were words spoken under the breath, whispered while working or traveling, as natural as calling upon a friend for help. In them, the people revealed both their reliance on the god and their closeness to him. He was mighty and distant in his storm chariot, yet also near and attentive to the cries of his people. In villages, certain festivals were dedicated to him. During these gatherings, elders led the people in long prayers, their voices rising and falling like waves. The prayers often began slowly, almost like a lullaby, and then grew louder and stronger, echoing the thunder itself. Each word was drawn out with reverence, each phrase carrying a weight of generations. Children would sit close, watching the flames of sacred fires leap and twist, their eyes reflecting both the firelight and the solemnity of the moment. Many of these prayers asked for balance. Give us rain, but not too much. Give us sun, but not too long. Give us victory, but spare us needless war. The people knew that life was delicate, perched between abundance and scarcity, safety and danger. And so, their prayers reflected that wisdom, never demanding recklessly, but always asking for harmony. They trusted Perun to provide what was needed, to hold back what was excessive, to temper both storm and drought. The rhythm of these prayers often mirrored the rhythm of the natural world. Farmers prayed in the spring for gentle rains, then again in summer for protection from storms, and finally in autumn for safe harvest. Travelers prayed at dawn before setting out, and at dusk when the horizon dimmed. Warriors prayed before battles, placing their faith in Perun's strength, and mothers prayed afterward, asking for the safe return of their sons. In every season, in every hour of the day, Perun's name was carried on the wind, rising and falling like the songs of birds. Songs, indeed, were another form of prayer. Many of the oldest songs were not only for entertainment, but for remembrance and petition. Their melodies were slow, repetitive, comforting like the rocking of a cradle. Words praised Perun's might, compared him to the unshakable oak, the blazing fire, the unstoppable storm. To sing was to keep him near, to honor him not only with words, but with the beauty of music. And in the evenings, when villagers gathered after long days, such songs were sung together, their voices blending in a harmony that mirrored their unity as a people. Children, too, learned prayers early. They were taught to murmur short blessings when thunder rolled, to greet the first raindrops with thanks, to place small offerings of bread or milk at the roots of trees sacred to Perun. These small acts were like seeds planted in young hearts, ensuring that the bond between people and their God would never fade. Through these gestures, children grew up knowing that Perun's care surrounded them always, even if unseen. The prayers often carried imagery, painting pictures in words that brought comfort. People prayed to Perun as the protector standing at the gates of the village, holding a flaming axe against the darkness. They prayed to him as the tall oak, whose branches sheltered all beneath it. They prayed to him as the bright flame on the hearth, chasing away the night. These images were more than metaphors. They were living reminders that the God of thunder was not far away, but present in the natural and daily world. On special nights, entire communities would gather in sacred spaces, groves of oak trees, clearings where the sky was wide and open. Fires were lit, their sparks spiraling upward like tiny prayers of their own. Around these fires, people stood in a circle, joining hands. Their voices rose together in steady chants, sometimes soft and low, sometimes strong and thunderous. In these moments, the boundary between human and divine felt thin, as if Perun himself stood among them, listening, perhaps even smiling at their devotion. Offerings often accompanied these prayers. Bread baked with care, honey collected from hives, bowls of milk. Sometimes even small wooden carvings were laid at the base of sacred trees or left near rivers believed to be touched by Perun's lightning. These gifts were given not out of fear, but gratitude. The people did not see prayer as a mere plea for survival, but as an exchange of respect. They gave a little of what they had, trusting that in return, the God would continue to watch over them. What made these prayers truly beautiful was their simplicity. They were not filled with complicated words or lofty phrases. Instead, they echoed the voice of the land itself, straightforward, heartfelt, born from a life close to earth and sky. To listen to them was to hear sincerity, not performance. They carried the calm assurance that Perun, mighty though he was, understood the humble speech of his people. At night, when silence settled over the fields, and only the soft chirping of crickets remained, some would step outside their homes, look up at the stars, and whisper one last prayer before sleep. These were the most intimate prayers of all, unheard by others, unrecorded by tradition, yet perhaps the most powerful. A shepherd might ask for strength to face tomorrow's journey. A mother might ask for her child's dreams to be safe. An elder might simply whisper thanks for another day. And always, Perun's name was carried upward, joining the countless other prayers drifting like invisible threads toward the heavens. Even in laughter, his name was present. When friends teased one another, they sometimes invoked Perun lightly, saying, "May Perun strike your stubbornness," not as a curse, but as a playful reminder of his ever-watchful presence. In this way, Perun was both revered and familiar, distant in his power, yet close in daily life. The beauty of these prayers was not only in their words, but in the sense of peace they brought. To pray was to feel less alone, to know that the struggles of life were seen and shared by a force greater than oneself. It was to believe that every storm had purpose, every bolt of lightning was aimed with care, every season guided by unseen hands. As generations passed, these prayers remained. Even as new faiths and new gods entered the land, whispers to Perun still lingered. Sometimes they were hidden, spoken only in secret. Sometimes they were merged into new traditions, disguised yet still alive. For the bond between people and their thunder god was too deep to vanish completely. In every storm that rumbled across the horizon, the old prayers stirred again, remembered in hearts, even if not spoken aloud. And so, Perun's legacy was carried not only in myths of battle or symbols carved in wood, but in the quiet murmur of countless voices across centuries. Every whispered blessing, every song sung to the sky, every offering placed with trembling hands, all were threads in a tapestry of devotion that wrapped the Slavic world in a cloak of reassurance. It is said that gods live as long as they are remembered. If so, then Perun's true strength lay not only in thunder and lightning, but in the prayers of his people. For even when the storm passed and the skies were calm, his name continued to echo, soft and steady, like a heartbeat beneath the vast sky. And in that echo, the people found rest, in the rhythm of the seasons, when fields blossomed and rivers swelled. The Slavic people felt the need not only to whisper prayers in their homes, but to gather together in sacred spaces, raising their voices in unity. These were not ordinary places, fields and groves, hills and rivers, chosen for their closeness to the divine. And among them, those dedicated to Perun carried a special weight, for he was the thunderer, the protector, the watchful guardian of order. Sacred places were never built of stone or mortar alone. They were woven from nature itself. The people believed that the divine was most present where the earth and sky met most directly. High hills open to the horizon, ancient oak groves, whose branches stretched upward like arms of prayer. Clearings where the air felt sharper and the winds spoke more clearly. All of these became natural temples. To step into such spaces was to step into a thin place where the boundary between human and God was fragile, where the breath of Perun could be felt in the rustling of leaves or the rumble of distant skis. The oak tree, above all, was his symbol. Mighty, unshakable, enduring through storm and season, the oak embodied strength and permanence. Its roots delved deep into the soil. Its trunk stood firm against winds, and its branches reached toward the heavens. When lightning struck, it struck oaks more often than other trees, and the people took this as a sign. Perun's hand had touched the oak, claiming it as his own. Thus, oak groves became sacred places of worship. In these groves, rituals unfolded with care. People gathered in circles, forming living rings of devotion around the trees. Fires were kindled at the center, their flames dancing upward like echoes of lightning. Around the fire, offerings were placed, bread baked from the year's harvest, bowls of milk and honey, sometimes the head of a bull or ram as a solemn sacrifice. Each gift symbolized gratitude, a returning of life's abundance to the one who made it possible. The rituals often began with silence. People stood, heads bowed, listening to the sounds of the grove, the crackle of fire, the whisper of leaves, the distant cry of birds. Slowly, a chant would begin, usually led by an elder or a priest known as a Valk. The chant started low, almost like a hum, and then grew stronger, voices weaving together until the grove itself seemed to vibrate with sound. Words praised Perun as the mighty protector, the wielder of lightning, the eternal guardian of order. The rhythm of these chants echoed the rhythm of storms. They began quietly, like distant thunder, then swelled to great crescendos, rolling and powerful, before fading again into silence. To those gathered, it felt as if they were joining in the very song of the sky, their voices harmonizing with the thunder above. Children clutched their mothers' hands, both awed and comforted by the sound, while elders closed their eyes, smiling as though hearing an old and familiar friend. Certain rituals were tied to specific times of year. In spring, when new life burst forth, people offered prayers for gentle rains, calling on Perun to bless the fields. They sprinkled water drawn from rivers around the village, symbolizing the life-giving storms he sent. In midsummer, when storms grew fierce, they lit great bonfires on hilltops, honoring the thunder god with fire to mirror his lightning. These fires were not only offerings, but celebrations, occasions when villages gathered, danced, and sang late into the night. Their joy itself, a form of devotion. Warriors, too, had their rituals. Before setting out for battle, they gathered beneath sacred oaks or on high ridges, where the sky stretched endlessly above. There they swore oaths before Perun, vowing loyalty, courage, and strength. Breaking such an oath was unthinkable, for it meant not only dishonoring one's comrades, but offending the Thunderer himself. Perun was invoked as the witness of promises, the guarantor of truth, the punisher of betrayal. His name bound men together in trust stronger than iron. One of the most solemn rituals was the offering of a bull or ox, animals seen as sacred to Perun for their strength and endurance. The animal was treated with honor, adorned with garlands, and led in procession to the sacred place. There, prayers were spoken, thanking the god for protection and asking for continued favor. The sacrifice was not only a gift, but a bridge, a way of giving something of great value to the divine in recognition of life's fragile balance. The meat, once offered, was often shared among the community, binding the people together in both reverence and fellowship. But rituals were not always grand or communal. Sometimes they were deeply personal, carried out by individuals in moments of need. A shepherd might leave a small carving of an axe at the foot of an oak, asking for Perun's watch over his flock. A traveler might scatter a few grains of bread into a river, praying for safe passage through stormy lands. A mother might light a single candle by her hearth, whispering Perun's name as she asked for her child's health. These small acts, humble and heartfelt, were seen as no less powerful than the greatest ceremonies. Sacred places also carried stories. People told of certain hills where lightning struck again and again, marking them as chosen by Perun. Such hills became pilgrimage sites, places where people traveled to pray, leaving offerings of coins, carvings, or bits of cloth tied to branches. These objects, though simple, were tokens of devotion, each carrying a story of hope, gratitude, or fear. The hills, in turn, became living altars, covered in the signs of countless lives touched by the Thunderer's presence. Rituals were more than requests. They were acts of remembrance. Each chant, each offering, each fire lit in the night was a way of saying, "We remember you, Perun, we honor you, we walk beneath your sky." And in this remembering, the people found strength. For to honor Perun was to align themselves with order against chaos, to join their small human lives to the great cosmic battle that thundered above. What made these rituals powerful was not only their form, but the spirit in which they were carried out. They were done with sincerity, not mere habit. They were expressions of gratitude, trust, and awe. To participate was to feel connected to one's neighbors, to the land, to the sky, and to the God who bound them all together. At night, when the fires died down and people returned to their homes, the memory of the rituals lingered. The smell of smoke clung to their clothes. The rhythm of chants echoed in their ears. The sight of flames leaping toward the stars remained in their minds. These memories carried them through daily struggles, reminding them that they were not alone, that their God walked with them in every storm, every harvest, every oath. Even centuries later, when times changed and new faiths spread across the land, echoes of these rituals remained. Fires were still lit on midsummer nights, songs still sung in the fields, oaths still sworn beneath the open sky. Though names and meanings shifted, the spirit endured. The people, whether they knew it or not, still carried the rhythm of Perun's rituals in their hearts. And so the sacred places remained, oaks still standing tall, hills still touched by lightning, rivers still murmuring with ancient prayers. They were silent witnesses of generations, holding within them the countless voices that had once risen in devotion. To walk through them even today is to feel a hush, as if the air itself remembers, as if Perun's presence lingers still, waiting quietly for the next prayer, the next offering, the next whisper of gratitude. For rituals, after all, are never truly lost. They live on in memory, in tradition, in the simple human need to reach beyond oneself and connect with something greater. And in the lands where storms still roll and oaks still grow, every God who lives in the hearts of peoples continue is remembered not always in stories, not always in symbols, but always present. Symbols carry meaning woven into the heartbeat, allowing even those who have never seen a God to recognize his presence in the world around them. For Perun, the Thunderer, his symbols were many, each one reflecting a facet of his power, his guardianship, his eternal struggle against chaos. Through these signs, the people could feel close to him, even when the sky was silent. Perhaps the most important of these was the axe. Perun's axe was no ordinary weapon. It was the embodiment of thunder itself. Legends said that he hurled it across the sky, and wherever it struck, lightning flared and thunder roared. To the people, the axe symbolized justice and protection. Just as a warrior wielded his weapon to defend his family and tribe, so Perun wielded his axe to defend the world against veils and all forces of disorder. Small wooden or metal axes were often carried as charms. Warriors tied them to their belts, believing that they would grant courage and strength in battle. Farmers placed them in their fields as talismans to guard the crops. Mothers even hung miniature axes above their children's cradles, trusting that Perun's protection would shield the young from illness and misfortune. Each tiny axe was a reminder that the god of thunder watched over them, his unseen hand ready to strike down any harm that threatened. Another symbol was the arrow, sharp and swift. Lightning itself was imagined as Perun's arrows, shot from the heavens to pierce the serpent veils. When a bolt split the sky, the people said, "Perun has loosed his arrow." The straightness of the arrow also symbolized truth and justice. Just as an arrow flies true when released, so truth cannot be bent, and justice cannot be avoided. Oaths sworn by Perun invoked this imagery. Promises were expected to fly straight and unwavering, like the arrows of the thunder god. Storms themselves were among his greatest symbols. The rolling clouds, the flash of lightning, the echoing thunder, these were his language, his presence revealed. People did not see storms as mere weather, but as signs of the cosmic battle above. The sound of thunder was his voice, his declaration of strength. The lightning was his weapon, his judgment upon the serpent. To stand in a storm was to stand in the very presence of Perun, to feel both awe and reassurance in the might of the sky. Fire, too, belonged to him. In the crackle of flame, the people felt his warmth and protection, mirroring the lightning's blaze. Ritual fires lit in his honor were not only offerings, but symbols of his eternal watchfulness. The sparks that flew upward were thought of as miniature lightning bolts, tiny reflections of his heavenly arrows. Fire on earth, lightning in the sky, both were his domain. Both linked heaven and home. Sacred trees carried his mark as well. The oak, struck so often by lightning, became a living symbol of Perun's touch. People carved his signs into oak trunks, believing the trees themselves carried his blessing. Branches from oak struck by lightning were treasured, kept in homes as protective charms. They were thought to carry a part of his fiery strength, his ability to ward off danger. To walk in an oak grove was to walk in Perun's presence, every leaf whispering his name. Among symbols, there were also geometric signs, patterns carved into wood, stone, and even embroidered into clothing. Spirals, crosses, and wheel-like designs represented the motion of storms, the cycles of thunder, the endless struggle of balance. These symbols, simple yet powerful, allowed people to carry Perun's essence with them in daily life. A carved mark on a doorpost, a stitched pattern on a sleeve, a charm worn around the neck, all were quiet affirmations of faith, reminders that order would prevail over chaos. The hammer, though less common than the axe, was sometimes linked to Perun as well. Like the axe, It was a weapon of force, a tool of strength, a symbol of power that built and defended. Some believed that when thunder shook the sky, it was Perun's hammer striking an anvil, forging bolts of lightning to hurl at his foe. The image connected him not only to destruction, but also to creation, as the blacksmith forges weapons and tools from fire and iron. Even animals became symbols of his power. The eagle, soaring high with piercing sight, was sacred to him. Just as Perun ruled the sky, so did the eagle, flying closest to the sun, watching from above. The bull, strong and unyielding, symbolized his force and endurance, and was often chosen as a sacrifice in his honor. Through these animals, people saw reflections of his might, living embodiments of the qualities they revered in their thunder god. The rainbow, too, was a subtle yet powerful symbol. After storms passed and the sky cleared, a rainbow sometimes stretched across the heavens. People believed it was Perun's bow, the weapon from which he shot his lightning arrows. The rainbow was not just beauty after turmoil, it was reassurance, a sign that Perun had triumphed once again, that the serpent had been cast back below, and peace was restored. Its colors were like a gentle promise that order, though always challenged, always returned. Symbols lived not only in objects, but in stories and gestures. When people raised their hands to the sky during prayer, they mimicked the upward reach of the oak, aligning themselves with Perun's strength. When warriors clashed their weapons together before battle, the ringing sound was an echo of thunder, a small imitation of the god's voice. Even in laughter or everyday phrases, his presence lingered, embedded in the very culture of the people. Children grew up surrounded by these symbols. They wore small charms of wood or bone, played with miniature axes carved by their fathers, listened to songs comparing Perun's arrows to streaks of sunlight. By the time they were old enough to join rituals, they already carried his symbols in their hearts. Through these simple objects and signs, they learned to see the world as filled with meaning, each tree and storm a reminder of the God above. What made these symbols powerful was their ability to carry both awe and comfort. To see a lightning bolt was to feel the might of the heavens, yet also the reassurance that Perun was defending the world. To wear a tiny axe was to feel both the seriousness of his justice and the closeness of his protection. In each symbol, the people saw both the grandeur of the sky and the intimacy of a guardian who cared for their daily lives. Even as centuries passed and times changed, these symbols endured. Some became hidden, carried quietly in traditions, no longer openly tied to the thunder god. Patterns once carved for Perun's protection continued to be stitched into clothing or painted on doors, their meanings shifting, but their power lingering. Oaks still stood tall, rainbows still arched after storms, fire still crackled in hearths, each carrying whispers of the old faith. To this day, to look at a lightning bolt splitting the sky, to hear thunder rolling across hills, is to feel something ancient stir within. It is the same awe the Slavic people once felt, the same recognition of a power greater than themselves. And though names and rituals may change, the symbols remain, eternal reminders of the bond between human hearts and the voice of the storm. Thus, Perun lived not only in myths and prayers, but in symbols carried through centuries, axes and arrows, oaks and rainbows, fire and thunder. Each one a fragment of his story, a piece of his presence, a sign that order still watches over chaos, that light still stands against shadow. And in these symbols, the people found comfort, strength, and peace, as steady and unshakable as the oak, as swift and bright as the lightning that splits the night. Change, like the turning of the seasons, is a constant in human life. Just as spring blossoms give way to the quiet warmth of summer, and summer itself softens into autumn, so too do beliefs evolve, shaped by new winds that sweep across lands and peoples. In the Slavic world, one such wind carried with it a faith that spoke of a single God, a crucified Savior, and the promise of eternal life. It was Christianity, arriving softly at first, like a distant echo, and then steadily growing, until it touched every village, every hearth, every heart. The encounter between the worship of Perun and the faith of Christ was not sudden, nor was it entirely harsh. Rather, it unfolded like a long twilight, where the glow of day lingers even as the night rises. For generations, the Slavic people lived in a world where the thunder god reigned, his axe flashing in the storms, his presence felt in the oaks and the lightning. But gradually, alongside this world, another vision began to take root, a vision of a single divine being, a Father of all, who ruled not from the clouds of thunder, but from the heavens beyond them. Christian missionaries, gentle yet determined, traveled among the Slavic tribes. They spoke of love and forgiveness, of a God who cared for the poor and the meek, of a kingdom not bound by earth, but by spirit. To people long accustomed to gods of nature and war, this message felt at once strange and familiar. Strange, because it told of one God rather than many, and because it placed value on humility over strength. Familiar, because at its heart was still the promise of protection, justice, and order, the same qualities that Perun had long embodied. The two faiths met not as strangers, but as reflections. Perun, the defender against Veals, mirrored Christ, the Savior who triumphed over death and evil. The storm god's justice found an echo in the divine judgment of Christianity. His protection of families and tribes resonated with the Christian God's care for his flock. And so, for many, the transition was not a matter of abandoning one for the other, but of blending them, seeing in the new faith a continuation of truths already known. In villages, this blending could be seen in quiet rituals. A family might still place a carved axe charm above the doorway, even as they also hung a small wooden cross. Fields might be blessed in the old ways with offerings of bread and honey, while also receiving a priest's prayer. Fires lit for Perun's storms continued to burn, now seen as both the thunder god's flame and the light of the Holy Spirit. The world was not divided, but layered, the old and new resting gently together. Stories tell of oaks once sacred to Perun being consecrated as places of Christian worship. Chapels were built near ancient groves, their bells echoing where once thunder alone had spoken. For many, the oak did not lose its holiness. Rather, it gained a new layer of meaning. If lightning struck its branches, it was still a sign of power, but now it could be read as both Perun's touch and God's will. The sacred tree stood as a bridge, connecting the roots of the old faith with the branches of the new. The rainbow, once Perun's bow, became a sign of divine promise, recalling the story of Noah and the covenant between heaven and earth. Lightning, still feared and revered, was now read as the power of the Almighty. The eagle, soaring in the sky, could remind the faithful both of Perun's sharp sight and of the Christian symbol of the evangelist John, whose vision reached the heavens. In this way, the old symbols did not vanish, but quietly transformed, carrying double meanings, speaking two languages at once. For those who still clung tightly to Perun, the shift was not always easy. They feared that forgetting the Thunderer would mean losing his protection, that the storms might turn against them if his name was no longer honored. Yet, even here, Christianity found gentle ways to reassure. Priests spoke of angels who defended against demons, of saints who carried swords of fire, of a God who split the seas and commanded the winds. The power of storm was not denied, but embraced, woven into the tapestry of the new faith. Over time, festivals once dedicated to Perun's might were reshaped into Christian feasts. Summer celebrations of thunder and harvest became days honoring saints. Rituals of fire and water, once linked to the storm god, were given Christian blessings, yet the rhythm of the old traditions remained. People still danced, still lit flames, still poured water in sacred ways, but now they did so with prayers to Christ, Mary, and the saints. The spirit of joy remained, even as the names changed. In the telling of myths, too, echoes lingered. The battle between Perun and Veles, once central to the people's view of the world, became folded into the Christian story of good and evil. Veles resembled the devil, ever scheming, ever seeking to drag souls downward. Perun resembled the archangels, defenders of heaven who hurled lightning against the forces of chaos. The cosmic struggle did not end, it merely changed faces, adapted to a new understanding of the universe. And yet, beneath this blending, something tender remained. The memory of Perun did not vanish in anger or violence, but settled into a quiet place in the people's hearts. He became a figure of the past, respected as part of their ancestors' ways, honored in stories told around fires. Children might no longer be dedicated to him, but they still heard of the thunder god who once guarded their forebears. His name became part of their heritage, woven into the fabric of who they were, even as their prayers turned toward Christ. This coexistence lasted for centuries. In some places, Christianity fully embraced and absorbed the old ways, while in others, Perun's symbols lingered longer, hidden in folk songs, in embroidery, in the whisper of thunder across fields. The blending was not merely historical, but deeply human, a reminder that faith is rarely a sharp line, but more often a flowing river, where one stream merges into another, both waters moving together toward the sea. Even today, echoes of this encounter remain. When thunder rolls, some still whisper an old prayer for protection, not always knowing whether it is to Perun or to God. Patterns embroidered on cloth carry shapes once linked to the storm god, though now seen as simple tradition. Oaks still stand tall in the landscape, sacred not by doctrine, but by instinct, reminding those who pass beneath them of something greater, something enduring. The meeting of Perun and Christianity was not the erasure of one by the other, but a transformation, a merging of worlds. In that twilight of faith, where the last light of the storm god blended with the first glow of the Christian dawn, the people found continuity. They did not lose their sense of protection, their awe of the sky, or their trust in order. They simply clothed it in new words, new prayers, new hopes. And so the Thunderer lived on, not as a rival, but as a memory, not as an enemy, but as an ancestor of faith. His voice still rolled in the storms, his symbols still rested in the land, his spirit still whispered through traditions. Yet above him now rose a new vision, one that promised eternity beyond the clouds, a kingdom where storms no longer raged. The Slavic world carried both with them the thunder of Perun and the peace of Christ, the storm and the cross, the oak and the chapel. Together they formed a harmony, a gentle blending that allowed people to move forward without entirely letting go of the past. It was not destruction, but transformation, not forgetting, but remembering differently. In the end, the encounter between Perun and Christianity was like the passing of a storm into clear sky. The thunder fades, the rainbow shines, and though the storm is gone, its memory remains in the freshness of the air, in the dampness of the earth, in the stories retold. Perun's time gave way to Christ, yet both together shaped the spirit of a people, carried gently through the ages like a song that changes its words, but keeps its melody. When a mighty oak falls, its roots remain deep in the earth, holding the soil together long after its branches are gone. So it was with Perun. Though the world of the Slavs turned toward the cross and the new faith of Christ, the Thunderer did not disappear entirely. Instead, he slipped quietly into the rhythms of daily life, into the whispers of folk songs, into the gestures of protection passed from mother to child, into the symbols woven into cloth and carved into wood. His survival was not loud, but gentle, like the steady heartbeat of the earth itself. For centuries, people lived in a world layered with memory. They prayed in churches, yet still turned their eyes to the sky when storms rolled across the hills. They spoke the name of God, yet still felt awe when lightning split an oak. Their hands shaped the sign of the cross, but the motions echoed older rituals once made in Perun's honor. Faith may have changed on the surface, but beneath, in the quiet spaces of the heart, the Thunderer lingered. One of the clearest ways Perun endured was in folklore. Stories told at night by the fire often blended Christian saints with echoes of the old god. In some tales, Saint Elijah took the thunder god's place, riding across the heavens in a fiery chariot, casting bolts of lightning at demons below. Yet those who listened knew in their hearts that this saint bore the soul of Perun. The name had changed, but the story was the same. The eternal defender striking down chaos from the sky. Songs, too, carried his memory. When storms broke, villagers sang verses that spoke of thunder as a heavenly warrior's drum, of lightning as golden arrows flying through the night. The words often bore Christian tones, but the imagery belonged to Perun. The melody of the old faith lingered in the harmonies of the new, a quiet reminder of the God whose voice was thunder. In embroidery and craft, Perun's symbols survived like seeds hidden in the soil. Women stitched patterns of spirals and crosses onto clothing, believing they brought protection and strength. The wheel, once a symbol of storms, appeared in decoration, now explained as Christian, yet still carrying echoes of thunder's cycle. In wood carvings, in pottery, in the simplest designs scratched into tools and toys, the signs of the thunderer endured. They were not always recognized for what they once were, yet they continued to guard, to bless, to connect people to their past. Even in gestures, his presence was felt. Farmers crossing themselves before entering fields echoed the old practice of calling on Perun for protection against storms and pests. Families lighting candles in their homes, seeking warmth and safety, reflected the eternal fires once lit in his honor. The rituals had new names, new prayers, yet their essence remained familiar, rooted in a deeper, older rhythm. The oak, ever sacred to Perun, continued to hold its quiet place in the landscape. People still gathered beneath its shade, still planted them near homes, still felt a certain reverence when lightning struck their branches. Even as churches rose beside oak groves, the trees kept their silent watch, bridging the memory of Perun with the faith of Christ. In many villages, it was said that the strongest prayers were those spoken beneath an oak, as though its roots carried words deeper into the earth and higher into the sky. In daily speech, traces of Perun lingered as well. Old phrases invoking the thunder god remained in proverbs and sayings, though over time their meanings softened into simple expressions. When storms came, people might still mutter words of respect, a half-forgotten echo of prayers once directed to him. Language itself became a vessel, carrying fragments of the old faith into the new world. The quiet survival of Perun was not resistance, but remembrance. He lived on because people carried him in their habits, their traditions, their unspoken reverence for the forces of nature. To plow a field while watching the clouds, to offer bread at a festival, to tie a ribbon around an oak tree, each was a gesture that connected them to the thunderer, whether they named him or not. What is remarkable is how gentle this survival was. There was no great rebellion, no bitter clinging. Instead, Perun became a part of the people's cultural soul, integrated into their new life, never demanding, never forgotten. His voice thundered less often in rituals, but always in the sky. His symbols were less explained, but always present. He became became less a god of worship and more a spirit of memory, a quiet guardian whose presence needed no altar to endure. As centuries passed, the memory of Perun grew softer, like the fading of a song. Yet it did not vanish. Even when people no longer spoke his name, they lived in ways shaped by his myth. They believed in protection against storms, in the sacredness of fire, in the power of oaks, in the cycle of light and shadow. These beliefs, though now clothed in Christian words, were threads woven by the Thunderer long ago. In some villages, elders told stories of a mighty warrior in the sky, not quite a saint, not quite a god, but something in between. They described him hurling fire, guarding cattle, chasing serpents across rivers. Children listened with wide eyes, sensing the mystery of a world larger than themselves. They might not know his old name, but they felt his presence, alive in every storm that shook their homes. The quiet survival of Perun shows us something profound. That belief is not erased by change, but transformed. Just as rivers carve new paths yet carry the same waters, so too did the faith of the Slavs shift, yet still flow with the essence of their thunder god. Perun's survival was not about temples or rituals, but about memory, about the human heart's need to hold onto what gives meaning, even when names and forms change. Even today, the legacy endures. In folk traditions, in seasonal festivals, in the awe felt when storms rage across the sky, Perun is there. Not always spoken, not always recognized, but present. He lives in the instinct to bless oneself when thunder cracks, in the comfort of firelight, in the respect shown to ancient trees. He survives in the way people still look upward, still listen to the sky, still find both fear and reassurance in the rolling of clouds. Perun's quiet survival is like a candle flame in the night, small, steady, enduring. It does not blaze, it does not demand, yet it continues to shine. Through generations, through change, through centuries of new faith, that flame has never been extinguished. It flickers in stories, in songs, in customs, in the hearts of those who carry their past within them. And so, the Thunderer remains not as he once was, mighty and central, but as a whisper in the wind, a symbol in the stitch of cloth, a spark in the fire. His presence is gentle now, but no less real, reminding us that nothing truly vanishes when it is woven into the soul of a people. Perun endures, quietly, patiently, like the deep roots of the oak, holding the ground steady beneath the feet of generations yet to come. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. Stories that once inspired fierce devotion settle into legends, symbols, and quiet remembrances. Yet some figures are too deeply rooted to ever truly fade. Perun, the Thunderer of the Slavs, is one such figure. Though his altars long ago crumbled, and his rituals became memories, he did not vanish. Instead, he continued to live transformed, reshaped, rediscovered in the hearts and imaginations of generations. His presence, once commanding in ritual, found new forms in folklore, art, literature, and the growing sense of identity among modern peoples. In villages, the memory of Perun endured through folk customs and seasonal celebrations. Fires still lit on midsummer nights carried echoes of his storms. Songs sung in fields or by rivers spoke of thunder and lightning, sometimes nomming saints, sometimes leaving the force unnamed, but always recalling the old protector. Grandmothers told children tales of the storm rider in the heavens, stories softened by time, yet carrying the familiar rhythm of the eternal battle between order and chaos. These customs, practiced not as worship, but as tradition, became gentle vessels of his spirit. In the 19th century, as scholars began to collect folklore, they found Perun's presence alive in stories across Slavic lands. Folklorists wrote of peasants who still linked lightning to a heavenly warrior, who believed that certain trees or stones bore the mark of thunder, who whispered old words of protection when storms rolled in. These discoveries revealed that, though centuries had passed, Perun was still quietly remembered, not as a god to whom offerings were made, but as a cultural ancestor whose shadow stretched across time. Artists, too, rediscovered him. Painters depicted scenes of ancient myths, giving form once more to the thunder god hurling his fiery weapons across the sky. Writers reimagined the old stories, weaving Perun into poems and epics that sought to capture the spirit of the Slavic past. In their hands, the thunderer became more than a relic. He became a symbol of strength, heritage, and the deep connection between people and nature. National movements in Eastern Europe often looked to Perun and other old gods as sources of pride. In times when nations sought to affirm their uniqueness, to remind themselves of their roots, the ancient thunderer appeared as a figure of identity. He symbolized resilience, the storm that could not be silenced, the guardian of a people's soul. In such moments, Perun was not worshipped, but honored, remembered as a symbol of endurance and continuity. Even in popular culture, echoes of Perun arose. Novels, songs, and later films sometimes borrowed his imagery, the storm, the axe, the eagle to evoke mystery and strength. Modern fantasy writers found inspiration in his myth, blending him into tales that reached new audiences. To hear his name in such stories was to feel the tug of ancient memory, carried forward into new forms. In villages, certain rituals persisted almost unchanged. When thunder rolled, some households still placed bread and salt on their windowsills, a gesture once meant to honor Perun. Children still heard warnings not to point at lightning, lest they attracted strike, a caution rooted in respect for the thunder god. These acts, often performed without knowledge of their origin, carried his spirit quietly forward. Tradition became memory. Memory became identity. The oak remained one of the strongest living symbols. In rural landscapes, oaks still stood as silent monuments. People planted them to mark important events, to honor ancestors, to guard homesteads. When lightning struck an oak, villagers sometimes cut and preserved a piece of the wood, believing it carried protective power. Though few would call it Perun's touch, the association lingered. The thunderer lived in the instinctive reverence shown to those trees, as natural and unspoken as breathing. In cities, statues and monuments began to rise, honoring the old gods as cultural icons. Perun, often depicted with an axe or lightning bolt, stood alongside other mythic figures in parks, museums, and squares. These statues were not places of worship, but of remembrance. They reminded modern eyes of a heritage older than stone churches or palaces, a heritage rooted in forests, rivers, and storms. To walk past such a statue was to feel the presence of an ancient protector, reborn in bronze and stone. Language, too, carried him forward. Old words and names linked to thunder and lightning continued to echo in place names, surnames, and expressions. In every thunder mountain or lightning field, in every family name derived from storm or sky, Perun's essence remained. These linguistic traces were like fossils, fragments of a past that still shaped the present, hidden in plain sight. In modern spirituality, some sought to revive the old ways. Neo-pagan movements across Slavic lands turned once more to Perun, honoring him as part of a reconstructed faith. Rituals were created, festivals held, prayers spoken anew. For these practitioners, Perun was not merely memory, but living presence, a god to be honored in the old style. Whether one agreed or not, the revival showed how enduring his image was, how deeply his voice of thunder still resonated across centuries. Yet for most people, Perun lived not in rituals or altars, but in feelings. To stand beneath a summer storm, to hear thunder echo across the hills, was to feel connected to something ancient. To watch lightning split the night sky was to remember, even unconsciously, the god who once hurled his fiery weapons. Awe, reverence, and comfort blended together, as they had for countless generations. The thunder was not only weather, it was memory, identity, heritage. Children, sitting in classrooms or reading storybooks, sometimes learned of Perun as part of their nation's mythic past. Teachers spoke of him not as a god to believe in, but as a figure to understand, a symbol of who their ancestors were. In those lessons, the Thunderer lived again, his story carried to a new generation. And when those children heard real thunder outside, they smiled, feeling the connection between myth and reality, between story and sky. Perun in modern memory is not about belief, but about belonging. He represents the link between people and nature, between past and present, between human life and the eternal sky. He reminds communities of their roots, of the strength that comes from enduring storms, of the beauty of traditions that survive even when transformed. His memory is a mirror in which people see not only a god, but themselves, their history, their resilience, their soul. Today, in a world of technology and constant change, Perun's symbols still hold power. The lightning bolt remains a sign of energy and force. The oak remains a symbol of strength and endurance. The storm remains a reminder of nature's majesty. Whether one thinks of Perun by name or not, his essence endures in these symbols. They speak across centuries, carrying the same message: that order will always rise to meet chaos, that protection is never far, that the voice of the sky is both fierce and comforting. And so, the thunderer lives in modern memory, sometimes in books, sometimes in songs, sometimes in statues, but always in the sky. Every storm is a reminder that he has never truly gone. His presence is not confined to history. It is alive in every clap of thunder, every flash of lightning, every breath of awe beneath the storm. Perun is not gone. He has simply changed, becoming a memory so deeply woven into human life that he no longer needs altars to endure. Like the deep roots of the oak, he holds steady. Like the river after rain, he flows onward. Like the storm after silence, he returns again and again, reminding all who listen that the old stories are never lost, only transformed. In this way, Perun belongs not just to the past, but to the present and future, living quietly yet powerfully in the hearts of those who still hear the thunder as a voice, and not only as sound. Every story, no matter how vast, eventually finds its ending. Yet endings are not always silence. Often, they are like the last glow of sunset, carrying warmth long after the sun has dipped below the horizon. The tale of Perun, thunderer of the Slavs, is such a story. His time of worship has passed. His altars lie in ruins. His rituals are woven into memory, but his essence endures. Like the deep rumble of thunder fatting across the hills, he lingers, strong yet gentle, distant yet near, a guardian whose presence has never truly left. To speak of Perun's legacy is to speak of more than a god. It is to speak of the bond between human beings and the forces of the natural world. For in Perun, people saw not only a deity of storms, but a mirror of their hopes, fears, and struggles. They saw a defender who stood against chaos, a protector who watched over families, a bringer of justice who ensured that promises mattered and wrongs were answered. He was the storm, but also the calm after the storm. He was the fierce lightning, but also the rainbow that followed. In him, people recognized the eternal rhythm of life itself. That recognition has never faded. Even when Christianity reshaped the spiritual landscape, even when centuries passed and modern life grew, the essence of Perun continued to flow through culture and memory. His name may no longer be spoken in daily prayers, yet his presence is alive in the awe felt during storms, in the respect for mighty oaks, in the instinctive gestures of protection whispered across generations. The thunder god became more than myth. He became a symbol of resilience, continuity, and the unbroken link between past and present. Perun's legacy endures in the way humans relate to nature. When thunder shakes the earth, people still pause, listening with reverence. When lightning flashes across the sky, they still feel both fear and wonder. These responses are ancient, unchanged, echoes of the same emotions felt by Slavic villagers long ago. In such moments, one can sense the presence of the thunderer, alive not in temples, but in hearts, in the instinctive awe that no age can erase. His legacy also lives in symbols. The axe, once carried as a charm, still resonates as an emblem of power and justice. The oak, his sacred tree, continues to symbolize strength, endurance, and the rootedness of life. The eagle, soaring high, still evokes majesty and vision. The rainbow remains a sign of hope after turmoil. Each of these carries a fragment of his spirit, whispering that the old God is never far, always woven into the fabric of existence. In stories and art, Perun's voice is heard again and again. Folktales pass his memory to children, scholars write of his myths, artists paint his image, writers reimagine his battles. In every retelling, he is reborn, not as he was, but as he is needed. Sometimes he is the mighty warrior, hurling lightning at serpents. Sometimes he is the quiet symbol of heritage, reminding people of their ancestors' strength. Sometimes he is simply the storm itself, honored as a reminder of nature's grandeur. His form changes, yet his essence remains. Even in modern times, when technology fills the skies with wires and satellites, Perun's legacy is not diminished. If anything, the thunderer stands as a reminder of what cannot be controlled. No invention can silence thunder. No machine can tame lightning. These forces belong to the heavens, beyond human reach, and in them, Perun's voice still speaks. He reminds us that no matter how far humanity advances, there will always be mysteries, always powers greater than ourselves, always a need for reverence before the sky. Perun's eternal legacy also lies in the balance he represents. His battle with Veels, the eternal serpent of the underworld, is more than myth. It is a truth of existence. Chaos and order, light and shadow, storm and calm, struggle endlessly. Perun's victory is never final, for Veels always rises again. Yet Veels never fully triumphs, for Perun always strikes back. This cycle reflects the human experience, our challenges, our struggles, our resilience. In Perun's endless battle, people see their own lives mirrored, and in his endurance, they find hope. To think of Perun is to think of guardianship. He was the protector of homes, of families, of fields and cattle. His presence assured people that they were not alone in the vast, uncertain world. Even now, that sense of protection endures. When people gather in times of trouble, when communities stand strong against hardship, when justice is pursued and wrongs set right, the spirit of Perun is alive. He remains the guardian, not of temples, but of values, courage, resilience, unity. As we reflect on Perun's journey, it becomes clear that gods never truly die. They transform, they adapt, they find new homes in memory, culture, and symbol. Perun's altars may be gone, but his story is eternal. He lives in the rumble of the sky, in the roots of the oak, in the fire of resilience that burns in human hearts. His legacy is not about the past alone. It is about the present and the future, about the enduring bond between humanity and the mysteries of existence. Imagine now a summer night when the air grows heavy and clouds gather on the horizon. The wind stirs, carrying the scent of rain. Darkness falls, and in the distance, thunder murmurs like a voice awakening. Lightning flashes, illuminating the world for a heartbeat. In that moment, standing beneath the vast sky, one feels small yet connected, fragile yet protected. This is Perun's gift, the reminder that life is larger than ourselves, that we are part of something eternal, something both fierce and beautiful. Children listening to bedtime stories, artists painting stormy skies, elders recalling ancient sayings, all keep his memory alive. He is not gone. He is carried forward in every heart that feels awe at the sky, in every soul that seeks protection in the storm, in every hand that carves or stitches symbols of strength. His legacy is eternal because it is human, because it belongs to the deepest part of our being, where wonder and reverence reside. And so, the story of Perun does not end, it simply changes form. Like thunder fading into silence, his presence shifts, yet the air still vibrates with its echo. Like a rainbow after rain, his spirit shines quietly, a promise that order will always return after chaos. Like the oak rooted in the earth, he stands steady, a symbol of endurance across ages. Perun's legacy is eternal because it is not bound to time or place. It is bound to the human soul, which has always looked to the sky for meaning, protection, and hope. As you close your eyes and let these words settle, think of Perun not as a distant god of the past, but as a companion of the present, living in every storm, every tree, every spark of courage. His legacy is the reminder that strength and peace can live together, that storms pass but return, that life is a cycle of struggle and renewal. In that truth, there is comfort, there is harmony, there is eternity. Perun, the Thunderer, the Guardian, the Eternal, lives still in memory, in nature, in us. And his story, like the storm, will never truly end. Every story, no matter how vast, eventually finds its ending. Yet endings are not always silence. Often, they are like the last glow of sunset, carrying warmth long after the sun has dipped below the horizon. The tale of Perun, Thunderer of the Slavs, is such a story. His time of worship has passed. His altars lie in ruins. His rituals are woven into memory, but his essence endures. Like the deep rumble of thunder fading across the hills, he lingers, strong yet gentle, distant yet near, a guardian whose presence has never truly left. To speak of Perun's legacy is to speak of more than a god. It is to speak of the bond between human beings and the forces of the natural world. For in Perun, people saw not only a deity of storms, but a mirror of their hopes, fears, and struggles. They saw a defender who stood against chaos, a protector who watched over families, a bringer of justice who ensured that promises mattered and wrongs were answered. He was the storm, but also the calm after the storm. He was the fierce lightning, but also the rainbow that followed. In him, people recognized the eternal rhythm of life itself. That recognition has never faded. Even when Christianity reshaped the spiritual landscape, even when centuries passed and modern life grew, the essence of Perun continued to flow through culture and memory. His name may no longer be spoken in daily prayers, yet his presence is alive in the awe felt during storms, in the respect for mighty oaks, in the instinctive gestures of protection whispered across generations. The thunder god became more than myth. He became a symbol of resilience, continuity, and the unbroken link between past and present. Perun's legacy endures in the way humans relate to nature. When thunder shakes the earth, people still pause, listening with reverence. When lightning flashes across the sky, they still feel both fear and wonder. These responses are ancient, unchanged, echoes of the same emotions felt by Slavic villagers long ago. In such moments, one can sense the presence of the Thunderer, alive not in temples, but in hearts, in the instinctive awe that no age can erase. His legacy also lives in symbols. The axe, once carried as a charm, still resonates as an emblem of power and justice. The oak, his sacred tree, continues to symbolize strength, endurance, and the rootedness of life. The eagle, soaring high, still evokes majesty and vision. The rainbow remains a sign of hope after turmoil. Each of these carries a fragment of his spirit, whispering that the old god is never far, always woven into the fabric of existence. In stories and art, Perun's voice is heard again and again. Folktales pass his memory to children, scholars write of his myths, artists paint his image, writers reimagine his battles. In every retelling, he is reborn, not as he was, but as he is needed. Sometimes he is the mighty warrior, hurling lightning at serpents. Sometimes he is the quiet symbol of heritage, reminding people of their ancestors' strength. Sometimes he is simply the storm itself, honored as a reminder of nature's grandeur. His form changes, yet his essence remains. Even in modern times, when technology fills the skies with wires and satellites, Perun's legacy is not diminished. If anything, the Thunderer stands as a reminder of what cannot be controlled. No invention can silence thunder. No machine can tame lightning. These forces belong to the heavens, beyond human reach, and in them, Perun's voice still speaks. He reminds us that no matter how far humanity advances, there will always be mysteries, always powers greater than ourselves, always a need for reverence before the sky. Perun's eternal legacy also lies in the balance he represents. His battle with Veels, the eternal serpent of the underworld, is more than myth. It is a truth of existence. Chaos and order, light and shadow, storm and calm, struggle endlessly. Perun's victory is never final, for Veels always rises again. Yet Veels never fully triumphs, for Perun always strikes back. This cycle reflects the human experience, our challenges, our struggles, our resilience. In Perun's endless battle, people see their own lives mirrored, and in his endurance, they find hope. To think of Perun is to think of guardianship. He was the protector of homes, of families, of fields and cattle. His presence assured people that they were not alone in the vast, uncertain world. Even now, that sense of protection endures. When people gather in times of trouble, when communities stand strong against hardship, when justice is pursued and wrongs set right, the spirit of Perun is alive. He remains the guardian, not of temples, but of values, courage, resilience, unity. As we reflect on Perun's journey, it becomes clear that gods never truly die. They transform, they adapt, they find new homes in memory, culture, and symbol. Perun's altars may be gone, but his story is eternal. He lives in the rumble of the sky, in the roots of the oak, in the fire of resilience that burns in human hearts. His legacy is not about the past alone. It is about the present and the future, about the enduring bond between humanity and the mysteries of existence. Imagine now a summer night when the air grows heavy and clouds gather on the horizon. The wind stirs, carrying the scent of rain. Darkness falls, and in the distance, thunder murmurs like a voice awakening. Lightning flashes, illuminating the world for a heartbeat. In that moment, standing beneath the vast sky, one feels small yet connected, fragile yet protected. This is Perun's gift, the reminder that life is larger than ourselves, that we are part of something eternal, something both fierce and beautiful. Children listening to bedtime stories, artists painting stormy skies, elders recalling ancient sayings, all keep his memory alive. He is not gone. He is carried forward in every heart that feels awe at the sky, in every soul that seeks protection in the storm, in every hand that carves or stitches symbols of strength. His legacy is eternal because it is human, because it belongs to the deepest part of our being, where wonder and reverence reside. And so, the story of Perun does not end, it simply changes form. Like thunder fading into silence, his presence shifts, yet the air still vibrates with its echo. Like a rainbow after rain, his spirit shines quietly, a promise that order will always return after chaos. Like the oak rooted in the earth, he stands steady, a symbol of endurance across ages. Perun's legacy is eternal because it is not bound to time or place. It is bound to the human soul, which has always looked to the sky for meaning, protection, and hope. As you close your eyes and let these words settle, think of Perun not as a distant god of the past, but as a companion of the present, living in every storm, every tree, every spark of courage. His legacy is the reminder that strength and peace can live together, that storms pass but return, that life is a cycle of struggle and renewal. In that truth, there is comfort, there is harmony, there is eternity. Perun, the Thunderer, the Guardian, the Eternal, lives still in memory, in nature, in us. And his story, like the storm, will never truly end.